Good morning, everybody. Welcome in. This is FSM Contest Fantasy Sports Markets Football Sunday Week 2 edition. My name is Ben Heisler. I am normally joined by my good friend over at SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio and Fantasy Alarms, Justin Fensterman, but Fensty is off this week. So I went to the bullpen. I called for righty or lefty. Do I go right hand or I go left?
Ambidextrous. Well, we'll go righty for the sake of it.
Impressive. Okay. So listen, the man knows matchups. So if an ambidextrous man can go ahead and go in for whatever matchup he wants, it's Matt Williams. And a great follow on Twitter at Matt77. Or did I already screw it up already?
Matt Williams, MATTWI77IMS. No L's, just sevens.
All right. We're going to update that on the lower third graphic over there. But
we take no L's.
Yeah, there you go. It's a beautiful way to go. But Matt Williams is with us. He of Fantasy Football Mercenaries and the Daily Blitz Pod, and DFS Statistics. He's also the CFO of Clipcast and the founder of the Fantasy Football Charity League. He does everything. And so not only do you do this show today, and we appreciate you jumping on, but you have another live streaming show right after this one.
Yeah, I do one for FF Mercs. FF Mercenaries is a website I founded with FF Stompy. You may know him as the winner of the Scott Fish Bowl, if he hasn't told you already. Better known as the guy with the singlet video. We do in-draft consultations. We'll break down your dynasty rosters. We'll do start-sits during the week, DFS consultations. So if you need help setting your lineup, there's no shame in it. Like we give plenty of free advice online, but if you want something more in depth, we'll take our time. We'll set an appointment. We'll just sit with you for a while, and you can pick our brain and we can talk strategy, which is always fun. So we have a live show. You can come there. It's completely free. Right after this, it'll be online. And Benny, was a guest last week. And he'll be on, and it's a fun time.
I had an absolute blast hopping on with you guys last week. It was a lot of fun. We took it right up until game time. I imagine we'll do the same. You also kept track of how we did against the spread with our week 1 picks. Can you give any sort of preview as to whether or not I completely crapped the bed or I actually stayed afloat?
I did not tally those up yet.
Okay.
Which I need to do.
We got time.
In between the short time in between the two shows. I'll probably have Sam take a look at it so he can tally them up so we can do it on the other show. Either that or I'll be doing it during my other show. I'll just be looking at the side, adding them up. So we'll see. I know I think me and you were in on the Titans, weren't we?
We were. We thought I thought the Titans would cover.
Yeah.
So I don't know
they did a little more than cover, but yeah, we and you definitely called that one.
Yeah, I got off to a rough start this week. I was looking at the Thursday night matchup. I thought that Cam Newton was somewhat more healthy than he appeared to be. That was an unmitigated disaster. I'm sure there's people coming in that are trying to figure out what to do the rest of the way with Cam. We already do have some questions coming in on the live stream. I see one on Periscope from Commish Marty, which we'll get to in just a second, so hang on tight. We talked about in our little preview video that for today, a lot of people are going to try and figure out in their season-long leagues of what to do with Antonio Brown. He is going to be active. He's going to be available. The Patriots are coming in as 18.5-point road favorites at Miami today. Let's start with the basic question. Let's say you drafted Antonio Brown in your season-long league. Are you playing him today? Do you feel confident enough in New England being able to use him on a short week for him to be able to go and get involved on this week 2 squad?
It's tough. I would have a hard time sitting him. In my heart, if I had even any of the hot waiver wire guys like Terry McLaurin, I'd kind of want to start him over him, but I couldn't do it. You can't do it. This game could be a bloodbath, and even if it turns into a running game like we all think it will, even one half of the Patriots could be like a league-winning performance. So, I mean, you do have Julian Edelman and Josh Gordon and the running backs to deal with. James White is going to play. He's not going to be delayed by the birth of his kid. Congratulations, James White, though. You got to start him. There's nothing you can do. I mean, in DFS, you can try to avoid him, or if you want to go out on a limb, like we said or previously, there's probably going to be no ownership. But in season long, you're kind of pot committed. I doubt you have another option that you can afford to sit him this week.
What's crazy too, Matt, is that I think if they were playing a more difficult team, we wouldn't be thinking twice about it. That's sort of the remarkable.
Yeah.
The matchup is so good, and Miami secondary, which was supposed to be the strength of their defense, right? Like their secondary with Patrick out there, was supposed to be a strength for them in a rebuilding era, but they looked awful. The speed of Hollywood Brown just destroyed them last week. Mark Andrews had a touchdown as well. Lamar threw 5 touchdowns. So I think if that were the situation, like we would all be looking at it from a completely different perspective and saying, well, New England's going to have to pass today. You have to fire up Antonio Brown. The fact of the game script is what changes all these different things, and I think that's what makes this fascinating.
Yeah, well, there's two things, right? They're going to be up so big, it's going to be a running game, so you're going to be afraid to start certain people. But they have to score the points to get up. Therefore, you do start them. But there's so many of the people to throw to. Therefore, you don't start them. And you're going to start Sony Michel because it'll be a running game. Not so fast because there's James White and Rex Burkhead, who you may want to start. But if they're up that big, maybe you can't start them because now they're going to go with just Burkhead and even I can't even come up with his name, even the fourth stringer. So I mean,
Damian Harris.
Damian Harris. So it's such a weird game. You just have to. Most of these guys you kind of went with, and you're gonna have to start kind of no matter what, and just kind of hope for the best. But I think you just kind of fire up all your Patriots in season-long leagues.
I think you do too. By the way, our buddy FF Stompy checking in already on Periscope. Boo this man! I don't know.
Why you don't like Benny? What's that about?
I don't know whether he's booing. He's
booing me.
What, after you threw him under the bus for celebrating his Scott Fishbowl championship?
Oh, he doesn't care about that. He's probably celebrating in the chat room. He's cool. If I won, I'd be wearing the belt right now. It'd be over my shoulder.
Perfectly reasonable. Just don't be like, who's the wrestler that had his championship belt stolen last weekend? Do you remember who that was?
Chris Jericho?
Yeah, it might have been Chris Jericho. Somebody has to be on that at all times. They need to be fully paying attention to make sure that doesn't happen. Let's go ahead and answer a few of your guys' questions. Let's start with Commish Marty. He's checking in on our Periscope stream. PPR league, does he go with A.J. Brown going up against the Colts at home or Larry Fitzgerald on the road against the Ravens? So I think we know right away that the Cardinals are going to run a lot of plays on offense. Cliff Kingsbury, I think, ran upwards of either 77 or in the 80s when it came to plays last week, and that was against Detroit, which is a slow-down paced team. Baltimore's a very run-heavy team, but they also proved us wrong by throwing for 5 touchdown passes last week. I would imagine that purely based on volume, Fitzgerald feels like the better play here, but it's also against a tough Ravens secondary. Coincidentally, A.J. Brown looked terrific and was sort of looking like the way we had anticipated for Corey Davis to look the last couple of years in Tennessee. I'm probably more likely to go Fitzgerald here. I think because of the targets that he'll likely get in Arizona having to play from behind, but where do you stand?
I think it's completely dependent on how the rest of your lineup is built. If you have a very safe lineup that you feel has a nice high floor, then I could take a shot on Brown. But if you just absolutely need that production, like that 15, that 10 to 15 points that you just know is going to be there, then you start Fitzgerald. For the simple reason is Fitzgerald led the team in targets, just over Kirk though. Kirk almost had as many, so I could see it flipping this week. It's still a tough matchup either way, so it's going to be a struggle for either. But I could see Kirk stepping up into a more productive role, which could steal from Larry. A.J. Brown obviously had a really huge game in his first NFL game. Corey Davis, everyone wants to people are already throwing him in the garbage, and last week made it easier. But he was being shadowed the entire game in Cleveland, and that's not going to be happening this time. So I'd like to see one more game. They obviously have Delaney Walker, Adam Humphries, Corey Davis, A.J. Brown, and Dion Lewis is still around to catch some passes. So A.J. Brown's floor could be quite low in a game where Derrick Henry could be seeing the ball a lot. So I'm probably going Larry Fitzgerald in most situations.
That's fair. That's perfectly fair. Let me follow up with one other thing that you brought up about A.J. Brown, because he was a popular waiver wire target for a lot of people this week. He, along with Hollywood Brown of the Baltimore Ravens and John Ross of the Cincinnati Bengals. How high are you on Brown for the rest of the year? And there was also another thing that I wanted to follow up to as well after you answer this question. But amongst those top guys for the waiver wire pickups on week 1, who do you see having the best and brightest future for the rest of the season?
For this season, I like McLaurin. I mentioned him already. He could conceivably have the lowest floor.
and I like him this week, too, by the way, in daily.
Yes. AJ Brown, I love the most from a dynasty perspective.
Okay.
I think he very well could be the wide receiver one today. He just might be. I mean, last week could have just been the story. He's just the best wide receiver on the team. McLaurin, I think you saw I can't remember the exact snap share. He was in there for like, I don't know, 93%. He's in there for like a ton of snaps. I still do believe in some of the other guys on the squad, Trey Quinn and Paul Richardson. Chris Thompson is going to be getting targets, but pretty much McLaurin looked good in the preseason. He looked good in the first game. I think he'll be solid going forward. John Ross is interesting because third-year breakout is a totally legitimate thing.
Right. You saw it last year from one of his own teammates in Tyler Boyd.
Yes.
But now he's in a way better offense, too.
Yeah. Andy Dalton's no joke as much as people want to make him out to be. With Joe, last year, John Ross was obviously just like a touchdown machine, but it wouldn't surprise me to have him keep this going. But AJ Green already has his boot off. He's coming back, so I'm going to enter that into the equation too. When he comes back, it's not going to be helpful, obviously, to John Ross. So if I had to pick between the three, McLaurin this year. If I had to pick for Dynasty, I like AJ Brown, but I do like John Ross. He's just the most risk of them because he also has a pretty decent injury history himself.
He does, and I also look at Ross as a guy that you can sell high on after a few weeks as well before AJ Green comes back. The Bengals were almost at 3.5 to 1 from passing to running the ball last week, and they were in that game against Seattle. They never trailed by more than 4 points. They never were up by more than 4 points. They never trailed by more than 4 points. So you would have figured that Cincinnati, too, would have probably gone a little bit more run heavy. I know they lost Mixon, but Bernard's now the 10th highest paid running back in the league. They could have gone to him. So what it tells me is that Cincinnati is full on board with a pass-heavy offense. They trust Dalton to run the show, and then when A.J. Green comes back, it almost has me a little bit excited, and this is a guy that after his injury in the preseason, I decided to full-on fade the rest of the way. You brought up Corey Davis as a guy that people are already discarding right away. And you're already starting to see some people feel that way. And really quickly before we answer this, I see questions coming in from Seth, who always checks in on this show. We always love having Seth on, so we'll get to him in a second.
Oh, I don't want to. We talked about the rookies. We did not mention Hollywood Brown. I put him above. I think I put him above McLaurin and Ross. Also, I don't know. He might be above all of them from what we saw in week one.
Even with the limited snap count, because he only played 14 snaps.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's which is why he's interesting to talk about. He definitely is just as risky as you can get, but you saw what he did on a limited snap count. He was banged up last week, so I think that had something to do with it. But you even saw what he did on not just the bomb Lamar laid out to him. He had a couple of underneath passes where he just kind of showed off that he's really electric. Miles Boykin is obviously still there, but I really like him too. I just think the ceiling is so high. I think I like A.J. Brown more from a long-term perspective, but his quarterback situation is a little weird. But yeah, Hollywood Brown is the hardest to gauge of any of them because his floor and ceiling are the furthest apart.
All right, before we get to Seth's question, I also see one on YouTube Live from Matt. We'll get to both of you guys coming up in just a second. We talked about the discarded player in Corey Davis and that you want to wait another week before you decide to completely and totally move on from him because you had a bad matchup last week. We're already starting to see people discard and move on from O.J. Howard. And granted, Thursday night's performance, 0 targets in the passing game. Bruce Arians saying, maybe he can get there. Sort of a feeling like O.J. Howard is now an afterthought in this offense is freaking out a lot of people. I'm not there yet. And the talent side, Arians also recognized that he's super duper talented. But where do you see O.J. Howard? Are you buying low on him? Are you moving on? Do you feel like the sky is not falling over in the situation for Tampa Bay? What's your perspective right now on O.J. Howard?
I want to buy. I don't know. I want to buy low, but it would have to be low. The problem with O.J. Howard is the Arians comments were concerning the most. I wouldn't be as concerned about what happened on the field as much as Arians' comments because they're just confusing that he can play better. I'm not sure what he means by that. The one of the problems with O.J. Howard being so talented, he's a good two-way tight end. He's a blocker. He blocks pretty well.
Yeah.
And the offensive line is so terrible for Tampa Bay, which, as we've seen, which may have contributed more to Jameis' struggles in week one than anything. Obviously he makes his own mistakes, but O.J. Howard almost has to be used as a blocker, so that's really going to limit him. So even if his production picks up, which I expect it to. I mean, he had some historic pace numbers going on when he was healthy last year, but with the way they need him to play at tight end, I'm not too sure. I wouldn't be too excited to get him. I'd check in for sure, but I mean, unless someone is completely given up on him, and then in some non analyst leagues, home leagues, people are even dropping him. So it's always good to check in. But there's so many cheap tight ends, so many deep tight end options that it's tough to give anything of value at another skill position in order to invest there, at least in redraft. And in
Did we lose you, Matt? Did you cut out on us? I think we might have had Matt cut out on us from the streaming standpoint. Yeah, he might have cut out. All right, so hopefully we get Matt reconnected. He was in the middle of a really good find when it came to breaking down O.J. Howard. So we'll try and get Matt reconnected on the show. In the meantime, let's go ahead and answer some of your lineup questions from our guy Seth over on Periscope. One running back, half-point PPR. Do I go with Duke Johnson, Miles Sanders, or Chris Thompson? He also has David Montgomery, but not sure if he's an option yet. That's a really, really tough situation because I actually do think Montgomery is going to get more carries this week, and Matt Nagy made a point in referencing that a little bit earlier in the week, that this is somebody that they want to make sure that they get involved because they know that the Bears need to rely more on their running game to get Mitch Trubisky a little bit more comfortable. There was a lot of certain situations last year, or not even last year, but last week, that Mitch just looked awful. And Green Bay's defense, they might be improved, but they're not at the point where I'm starting to get completely and totally. I'm not falling in love with the Packers defense, and we'll get Matt back on in just a second to make sure that to get his perspective of being a Packer fan. But with half point PPR, I think the safest play out of all these guys is probably Duke Johnson, because I think Deshaun is going to be running again for his life. He seemed comfortable in throwing to Duke last week. I know that High got involved as well. But I'd say probably the safest option is Duke Johnson, but I will say this about Miles Sanders. He outsnapped the rest of the Eagles running backs last week, and he has a prime matchup on the road against Atlanta. And Atlanta, over the last 3 years consecutively, have given up big numbers. In fact, I think they led the league last year in yardage and catches to running backs. So with regards to Miles Sanders, you're not going to get a better matchup as far as half PPR or full point PPR is concerned. I have exposure to Miles Sanders in several lineups. And by the way, yes, DFS Mafia, we are taking questions. We're currently answering some questions right now. You are about third or fourth next on the live chat, so we are taking your questions here. So hang tight. We'll make sure that we get to you in just a second. So I think for this situation, Seth, I'm probably going Miles Sanders. It might be a little bit more risky, but I feel a little bit more confident in Miles Sanders for this particular situation. Also, from Matt over on YouTube Live, he wants to go with McCole Hardman, Hollywood Brown, or Duke Johnson at the flex in a full point PPR. I'm not there yet on McCole Hardman, and I know that it's an exciting opportunity. People are looking at him as Tyreek Hill light, and this is why they drafted him in case Tyreek Hill was going to be suspended or if the Chiefs had to move on from him. He played about 75% of the snaps, but only saw one target. And yes, it's a good matchup against Oakland, and maybe he catches a long touchdown, but for full point PPR, I'm not ready to rely on McCole Hardman just yet. I'm not there at this point. So I'm probably going ahead and not taking him. Hollywood Brown looked terrific. It's another really good matchup for him at home against Arizona. But again, this is something that Matt and I were just talking about. He didn't play more than 15 snaps. So if you're talking about guys that are going to be on the field, that have volume, that have opportunity, I'm not there yet when it comes to Hollywood Brown. So I think the right play here and the smart play here is Duke Johnson Jr., especially in full point PPR. If we're talking about standard, I think you can make a more compelling argument for McCole Hardman or for Hollywood Brown. Yeah, by the way, Stompy, if you want to hop on instead, go ahead and find me on Skype, and we'll go ahead and route you through. It looks like our buddy Matt is having some technical difficulties. So go ahead and find me, Stompy, over on Skype. Just search my name, and you'll be able to hop on the show right away. DFS Mafia, did you have a question? I'm seeing that you were interested, but I don't see anything as of yet. So go ahead and send them in if you have some for now. One more from Seth. Half-point PPR between Smokey John Brown or Tyler Lockett. Seems easy, but I do have Allen as my quarterback. So what's interesting is that on the daily sites, Josh Allen is going to be a very cash game viable option on the road against the Giants today. It's a really good matchup. We saw the Giants just get picked apart by Dak Prescott. Now, is Prescott a far better passer than Josh Allen? Certainly looks to be the case this year. And John Brown is the number one wide receiver in this offense, and he's going to be more than just a deep guy, which we saw from him the last few years. So, we'll it looks like nope, he was calling through, and then we'll try it again. Maybe we'll be able to get reconnected with Stompy. Yep, here it is. Hey, Stompy, are you with us?
Hold on, I can't hear you.
Okay, well, we are live. And, nope, guess the key is gone. Isn't this fun? Isn't this fun? This is what happens. This is live streaming, television, radio, media, whatever you want to call it. So I appreciate you guys continuing to be patient with us. So we'll make sure that we get all of your questions answered. Again, apologize for the technical difficulties on our partner side, but we will get that fixed and ready to go. I'm a fan of Tyler Lockett today. And it's not to say that I'm not a fan, Seth, of John Brown, but this just feels like a situation where even though Pittsburgh's defense, I expect to bounce back this week, Seattle's going to have to throw to keep up, and he's going to see more than a few targets here. All right, let's see if we can get Stompy on the line with us.
There we are.
All right, Sam, we got you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we have video for you, or is it just going to be audio today?
God, everything's the worst right now.
All right, so let's go ahead and change it. Sam Lane is with us. He of Fantasy Football Mercenaries. Matt is having some audio and video difficulties there. Sam, for people that are unfamiliar with your work, where can they find you?
Everywhere. I host two podcasts, the Dynasty Diagnostic and the Fantasy or Superflex Super Show, right for FF Statistics. And then obviously Matt and I started FF Mercenaries together. So, yeah, everywhere. And then I appear on all of the podcasts. So
every single one. There is no podcast that is going to deny you the opportunity to jump on in. And then people can follow you on Twitter at FFStompy, correct? Don't tell me we lost. Don't tell me we lost Sam as well. This is wow. We are just having a banner day here. So to answer your question, Seth, looks like we do we have you back, Sam?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, so I think just what we're gonna do is gonna go ahead and just keep it on audio for now.
Yeah, no worries.
And by the way, now I screwed up our camera, so now people can see that I'm not actually behind the beautiful skyline of Kansas City. You got secrets out, everybody. Secret is fully on out. All right, here we go. So, Sam, the question that we were answering, and I see questions coming in from Sizzle, from did we lose? Okay, no, Sam's still there, right?
No, I'm here.
Okay,
no, I'm here.
So we still have questions coming in from Sizzle, from S Martin 1117, from Stacks, and from V Squats. We'll get to all of you guys coming up in just a second. But Sam, the question that we were just answering from our buddy Seth is half-point PPR, John Brown or Tyler Lockett. A lot of people really love Josh Allen today, and rightfully so. It's a great matchup on the road against the Giants. He gets to go back to the Meadowlands Stadium where he engineered that comeback in Week 1. But Tyler Lockett, listen, Seattle's going to have to throw today against Pittsburgh. I think this is a bounce-back spot for the Steelers. Lockett just not getting enough targets last week. I think they changed that this week. So he's the guy I feel more comfortable with, even though Josh Allen is in a great matchup. What about you?
I actually like John Brown this week because of that New York Giants secondary. If it was full point PPR, I might feel a little bit better about Tyler Lockett. But yeah, the Giants just gave up a monster game to Gallup last week. I believe 156 yards.
Yeah,
I would have to check on that. But and Josh Allen serves the same role for the John Brown serves the same role for the Buffalo Bills, that deep over the top guy, and he had 8 targets last week, set a record for Buffalo for a wide receiver in their first game with the Buffalo Bills in terms of receiving yards, and I believe the first 100-yard game for a Buffalo Bill in his first game since Eric Moulds in 1999. So it seems like he is the wide receiver one there, him and Cole Beasley. And I like that matchup because, like I said, that New York Giants secondary is pretty awful, and I believe that John Brown could have another big game this week.
It's fun to talk about John Brown as a cash viable option now, right? Like, it just seems weird.
Well, and it it's funny. He went from one big arm quarterback, and we saw what he was, I believe, the wide receiver 18 with Joe Flacco last season before Lamar Jackson took over, and then he comes in and he sees about the same type of player in Josh Allen, maybe less accurate, but you get the idea. Strong arms, throws it deep downfield, and that's perfect for what John Brown does.
Absolutely. Let's continue on. A question coming in from Sizzle on Periscope. I see questions from S. Martin, from DFS Mafia, from Stacks on YouTube Live, from V Squad, from Sean, from Jared. We will get to all of your guys' questions right here on FSM Football Sunday. Really appreciate Stompy jumping on with us today while Matt is dealing with some technical issues. By the way, are people going to be able to see you guys coming up right after our show today as well?
I am hoping so. Matt seems like he's working on stuff. I think I just figured out what my issue was. So, because I had access to I had another website accessing my webcam, so I could probably do that webcam as well. But yes, they will be able to watch us here as we get our technical difficulties figured out.
Perfect. Very good. And again, make sure you guys are following him on Twitter at FFStompy. You can see his information on the lower third on the other side of the screen. By the way, if you're playing over at fantasysportsmarkets.com, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see a promo code that says FF Sunday. That will get you. There he is.
Yeah, there we are.
He is here.
I figured it out. I knew what I was doing.
Sam is here in all of his glory. Well, I appreciate you hopping on. We made a bullpen call with Matt this week, filling in for Fensty, and how we have to once again go back to the bullpen. It's September baseball, man, and football season. That's what we got to do.
All right.
So let's continue on and answer some more of your lineup questions from Sizzle on the tweet machine. It's a tight end toss-up, half-point PPR between T.J. Hawkinson, the record-setter rookie from last week, or Vance McDonald. Appreciate the kind words, Sizzle. This is a tough one because I had high expectations for Vance McDonald this year. 169 targets were vacated from Antonio Brown leaving the squad, and certainly watching Big Ben struggle the way he did, it felt like that game for Pittsburgh. They were lost offensively. They had no identity. They couldn't get Connor going. He only connected with Juju Smith-Schuster for 6 catches for about 70-something yards. I'm a buyer on Vance McDonald this week, coincidentally with Hawkinson. Going up against the Chargers is a much tougher matchup than going up against Arizona. So I feel more comfortable going with Vance McDonald this week.
I don't think you're going to go wrong here either way. A lot of people are looking back at last year's stats for the Chargers against tight ends, and they were very good against tight ends. But Derwin James is out. And while the Colts didn't look good, I mean, Eric Ebron returned to form and dropped a touchdown in the end zone, which is the Eric Ebron we know and love. I would take week 1 with a grain of salt for the Colts because it's Jacoby Brissett. We don't necessarily know what this offense is going to look like right now with Jacoby Brissett. Plus, Marlon Mack ran all over them, which coincidentally makes me like Kerryon Johnson this week. And I think a lot of people are down on him, and he might be a low ownership in DFS. So if you want to play him in like GPP lineups, that might be a good option. But Yeah, I mean, it seems like the Lions want to emphasize TJ Hawkinson in that offense. And I've been using this analogy a little bit, or this comparison a little bit, and it's hard to compare anybody to Rob Gronkowski, who arguably is the most dominant tight end of all time. But it seems like that's the way that Matt Patricia wants to build this offense, is like the Patriots. You look at the running backs. Kerryon Johnson looks more like a Rex Burkhead type, though he's going to get more volume. J.D. McKissick is going to be that James White type, and then C.J. Anderson's going to be that LeGarrette Blount type role. And then you have a very good blocking and receiving tight end in T.J. Hawkinson. And it seems like that's how they want to use him, is in that Rob Gronkowski type role. So he's going to get emphasized. And I think like I said, a lot of people are looking at last year's stats, looking at week 1 with the Colts, and they're saying, well, the Chargers are good against the tight ends. And I actually think that Vance McDonald's got a rougher matchup this week, because you have Wagner, you have, and I just forgot the other linebacker's name. Anyway, you have two very good cover linebackers. You have decent safeties, and I expect a bounce back for the Steelers. So I think you're not going to go wrong either way. But I do like Hawkinson, and I have him in a couple DFS lineups this week because of the fact that people think the Chargers are going to be able to stop them. But with Derwin James out, I don't think they're going to be nearly as good against tight ends this year.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair. And your point about Patricia, like, it's so funny how the NFL is blatantly a copycat league, right? They're trying to do whatever they can. And Patricia, it's not just a copycat league. It's completely copying the man that he worked for so long. And yes, I don't know if I look at Hawkinson as any sort of generational talent the way that Gronkowski is, but I think he's a very good tight end, and they like him on both sides to be able to block and also be able to pass protect, and also catch passes in the as well. So I like him, and I think for a full season long guy, people being able to pick up Hawkinson and Darren Waller after week 1 is going to work out in their favor, because they're likely going to get 2 top 10 tight ends the rest of the season. But I just think from the matchup perspective this week, I'm more likely to side with McDonald. Let's continue on. A lot of really good questions so far coming in. This one coming in from S. Martin 1117 on Periscope. Who has a better game this week, Todd Gurley or Derrick Henry in PPR? I'll let you answer this one first, Sam, because I have some perspective here that I'm curious to get your thoughts on.
Oh. Even the Colts were destroyed by Austin Eckler last week, and Justin Jackson looked good as well. I'm leaning a little bit towards Henry, but I think the Colts are due for a bounce back week. In terms of defense, I think that defense is a lot better than we think or we saw in week 1. Darius Leonard even recognized that he didn't play well. It's tough. I think volume-wise it's Henry, but Gurley efficiency-wise is better. So I'm going to lean – I'm actually going to go with Gurley here. I think Gurley's going to – he had 14 carries for 97 yards, I believe.
Yes. It's just a tad under 100.
Yeah, and the one thing that people point out is, well, Malcolm Brown got the 2 touchdowns. But do you really expect Malcolm Brown to get 2 vulture touchdowns like that? I mean, one of them was like a 1-play drive where they got a fumble and then they ran it in. So I do expect Gurley to still get some red zone looks. He didn't get any red zone looks last week. I expect him to get more red zone looks. So I think for efficiency's sake, I'm going with Todd Gurley here.
I think so too. I think the PPR component of it helps in this decision. If it's standard, you know that Derrick Henry is going to be the goal line back, and I think you can feel more comfortable that he gets into the end zone. And I still think Derrick Henry could be in line for a really nice game. I actually really like both of these running backs in the Colts and the Titans game for tournaments this week. Marlon Mack is going to get fed the ball a lot this year, especially a lot of people were down on him when Andrew Luck went out, and it was understandable, but I just felt more of the offense was going to have to go through Marlon Mack for them to feel like they could open up play action for Brissett and just slow down tempo and keep themselves in the game. as far as this matchup goes, you and I are in agreement here. I think Todd Gurley is the play. I think the way in which this game sets up against the Saints is it's going to be more downfield. It's going to be more back and forth, and I think they feel more comfortable with Gurley in that spot. But listen, with Malcolm Brown getting the 2 goal line opportunities last week, definitely something to keep an eye on. And I would still make the argument that even if Malcolm Brown gets like 8 carries for 22 yards, but and doesn't get into the end zone, but he gets the goal line work, you have to look at him, if you're a Todd Gurley owner, as one of the most valuable handcuffs in the NFL. You have to go and get him yesterday, because if he's going to be the goal line back, you need to make sure you have that protection for your team.
By the way, Carlos Hyde ran all over the Saints last week. The Carlos Hyde that we were all calling a jag this offseason, that we were saying is one of the worst
in Kansas City.
Right, one of the worst running backs over the last 2 seasons running the ball, just destroyed the Saints, who were supposedly, last year they had a good run defense. I think they were like top 5 in the league in run defense.
Yep.
So that should tell you a little bit. I would feel good about Gurley going up against the Saints.
Let's go to YouTube Live and get a question from our buddy Stacks. I need to fill my wide receiver 2 in flex. I have Tyler Boyd, T.Y. Hilton, Adam Thielen, Alshon Jeffrey. These are always tough when they give you like 8 different guys. It's wide receiver 2 and wide receiver flex PPR. So let's sort of go through them one by one. We can go ahead and probably get rid of, if it's PPR, Hollywood Brown and D.D. Westbrook this week. Yeah. Minshew's going to target D.D. Westbrook because Minshew doesn't like to throw the ball deep. But this is a tougher matchup than going up against Kansas City's defense. So would you say we can probably eliminate D.D. Westbrook and Hollywood Brown from the mix?
With the other guys that you talked about, yes.
Okay. Duke Johnson is also in the mix. I think we can keep him in there for now. But I'd probably have Tyler Boyd over Duke Johnson. I'd probably have T.Y. Hilton, and I'd probably have Adam Thielen over Duke Johnson as well.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, so now we have to fill 2 spots between Tyler Boyd, T.Y. Hilton, Adam Thielen, and Alshon Jeffrey. Jeffrey's got a nice matchup on the road against Atlanta. He got into the end zone last week. To me, Boyd and Hilton, it just feels like those are the guys that are going to see the most volume in PPR. Thielen's going to see a little bit more targets this week. Cousins is going to throw the ball more than 10 times on the road against Green Bay. But, I just feel like the matchup for both Boyd and Hilton, I like them better than Thielen and Jeffrey.
I agree. Yeah, I heard you say something about the Packers not being nearly as good as they were on last Thursday, and I agree with that. But they still have 2 very good young corners. Though you probably should be starting Diggs and Thielen, I would temper expectations this week.
I think that's fair. Let's go to Periscope, VSquad42. Do I go with Adrian Peterson at home as he gets the start today, or Devontae Freeman at his running back 2? Listen, I know that Adrian Peterson was, I don't want to even call it impressive. It was eye-opening seeing that guy at that age, after we thought we had been washed for the last couple of years, go to Washington and hang around for as long as he did. Now, he also had games where he had 15 carries for about 15 yards. And that's just sort of the nature of Adrian Peterson's type of game this year. Like, if the game script dictates for him and the holes open up, he can still break through. But I want nothing to do with Adrian Peterson, especially going up against Dallas this week. To me, Devontae Freeman is the candidate to bounce back. Atlanta just plays so much better at home than they do on the road. Matt Ryan's numbers, especially in domes, have been discussed at nauseum, not only on this show, but across the fantasy football landscape. If Devontae Freeman can't get him going this week, both in the run game and the passing game, I know the Eagles are a good defense, and they struggled last week. But I feel much more comfortable rolling out Devontae Freeman in week 2 than I do for Adrian Peterson.
I actually hate the matchup for Devonta Freeman, but he is involved in the passing game, which puts him over AP for me. Like you said, it's not a good matchup for AP either, and that Cowboys offense clicked on Sunday night. So I would go with Devontae Freeman here because of his pass game chops, and because I think that the Redskins are going to have to throw. I think Chris Thompson's actually a good DFS start this week because of that.
Do you worry about Thompson not necessarily having much of a ceiling in this offense? He's a clear good high floor player, But do you worry that he's just not going to get enough targets and not enough red zone looks to be able to justify?
Well, I mean, the year, was it 2 years ago, 2017, where he was like a RB1 in the games that he played. He got enough volume there. And I believe he had 10 targets. Did he have 10 targets last week, or maybe it was 8? I can't remember. But he was targeted fairly often last week. And I think it really depends on game script and really depends on health. But yeah, I think I agree that we can't really expect Chris Thompson to do what he did in 2017. I mean, he had 39 receptions for 510 yards in 10 games, including 4 touchdowns, 6 total touchdowns. But so I do think I agree with that sentiment. He's a high floor but relatively low ceiling guy.
All right, we got about 15 minutes left in the show before we let Stompy go, and again, make sure you guys join him and Matt Williams coming up on the FF Mercenary show at 10:30. I'll stop by just after 11 o'clock Central Time. Looking forward to hopping back on with those guys again, and make sure you guys are following our guy over at Twitter at FF Stompy. What about, this is a question coming in on YouTube Live, a flex play and a full point PPR from Sean. Do I go Todd Gurley, Derrick Henry, Devin Singletary, Tyler Lockett, and John Ross? So let's sort of do that process and elimination play again. John Ross, I think you probably eliminate from the mix. He was terrific in week 1, but in full point PPR, I just don't know if he's going to see enough targets consistently to feel good about him at this point. So are we eliminating John Ross?
I think so. I mean, I actually like him in this offense. I think he plays that Brandon Cooks role. I think he plays that Brandon Cooks role. But yeah, I would wait starting him until he gives me back-to-back weeks, or he gives me some sort of stability.
I think we can also eliminate Devin Singletary. I like him as the future back in Buffalo. I think they've shored up their offensive line quite a bit. It's not necessarily there yet, but incredible efficiency when he played. But Frank Gore is still getting too many carries for us to feel confident about Singletary's role. So now we got to figure out between these 3 guys in a flex full-point PPR between Todd Gurley, Derrick Henry, and Tyler Lockett. We can probably eliminate Henry just because he's not going to catch any passes. Granted, the touchdown that he caught was a pass, but it was a screen pass, and that's Derrick Henry has the ability to make that happen. But if it's between Todd Gurley and Tyler Lockett, that's really tough because I expect Lockett to bounce back this week. So I'm more likely to go with. I think I'm leaning Todd Gurley. Even though I expect Lockett to have a bounce back, the targets are so hit or miss with him. And Pittsburgh's defense, I think, is going to come ready to play. I think the safer play is Gurley, but the higher upside play is Lockett.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it depends on who you have in your lineup there. If you have some good safe floor guys, let's just say Edelman for example, then I would feel comfortable playing Lockett. That Pittsburgh secondary is their weakness. I do think Lockett's going to get more than 2 targets, and he's always able to have that one reception, that one, like we saw last week, the one reception for 44 yards and a touchdown to save your game.
He always saves the day, right? Somehow, Tyler Lockett does. He always just finds a way, either in the end zone or he'll get like 4 targets late in the game and get a burner play. Like, that's just what he does.
Well, and he even talked about, like, he was being bracketed, and that's what allowed DK Metcalf to go one-on-one a lot. And I think they saw, or hopefully teams saw, that you can't go one-on-one with DK Metcalf, especially on that outside. And I especially don't think that secondary is going to be able to bracket coverage Tyler Lockett this week. So I definitely expect a bounce-back game from him, but he has a little bit more variance than Todd Gurley does.
From YouTube Live, from Jared, I need 2 running backs, full point PPR. Do I start Sony Michel, Matt Breida, Devontae Freeman, or Malcolm Brown? If it's full point PPR, Sony Michel, we're talking about guys that don't catch passes. Sony Michel is right in that conversation. And he was a guy that Maddie and I talked about at the beginning of the show, too. The idea that, do you buy the game script for Sony Michel? It makes all the sense in the world, but when they were up big last week, it was Rex Burkhead that was getting the bulk of those carries in the second half. So let me get your initial thoughts on Sony Michel today.
Well, I like Sony Michel. Obviously, I don't think the Dolphins' defense is as good as Pittsburgh. even though they were getting blown out. I think people forget Pittsburgh's run defense is actually very good. They ranked 8th in DVOA last season. I believe they allowed the 8th fewest fantasy points to running backs, and they were swarming him. They were not. He didn't have any holes to run through, and he just doesn't pose as much of a threat in the pass game as Rex Burkhead, I think, which is why he had more holes, and that might be just me making stuff up as we go. But Sony Michel still had the most touches of the running backs in that game, even though he was ineffective with them. And so now he is going going against a defense that is a lot worse against the run. I believe they ranked 25th in DVOA,
yes,
and they allowed the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. This is going to be a blowout. They're probably and here's the one thing. I don't know what Bill Belichick's going to do. Is he going to do what the Ravens did last week and blow them out, scoring 59 points? We've seen him do that against the Tennessee Titans one week. I believe they beat him 59-0 in that snow game. Mm-hmm. But I expect Sony Michel to get plenty more work. I would not be surprised to see him get 20-plus carries in this game just because they're going to be up big early like the Ravens were, and they'll probably want to run out the clock a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly reasonable explanation from Michel, and I do think he'll be cash game viable. Breida still concerns me, even though he's tough as nails. He just always seems to exit every game with some sort of injury before trying to find a way back. You talked about the matchup for Freeman and his involvement in the passing game, and then Malcolm Brown, who didn't really, wasn't actively involved in the passing game, but still got those 2 touchdowns. So I think if we're trying to decide between 2 running backs of those 4 in full point PPR, I'm probably likely to side with Michel and Freeman because I do think Michel gets into the end zone a couple times and Freeman will be the most involved in the passing game.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I understand Malcolm Brown and the 2 touchdowns and the 11 carries, and I think Malcolm Brown has a role this year.
Yeah, he does have some standalone value.
But I don't think you can expect that ceiling week in, week out.
There's a question coming in from Corey on YouTube Live. How do you guys feel about Joe Mixon today? All the reports are that he plans to play. He came back to practice on Friday. Granted, it was a bit limited. Does have a sprained ankle, and clearly the Bengals feel comfortable in the role that Gio Bernard has. So, if it's season long, you probably drafted Joe Mixon early. Mm-hmm. And I think you probably have to roll him out. But in daily, I'm probably not touching him. And I don't even really like his opportunity this week as a GPP flyer either. I'm probably staying away from Joe Mixon.
I don't even know why they would be playing him because Gio Bernard is good enough to start for them. I mean, we've seen him be a starter. We saw it last season.
Yeah, they clearly value him.
Right. He was effective as a starter. And I just don't think this game is going to be that close to me. The 49ers are bad. Jimmy G is bad. We saw he couldn't take advantage of what we thought was a good matchup last week. But maybe now the Buccaneers have a better defense than we think. Regardless, I like this offense now, the Bengals offense. I think Gio's would be fine in it. I think the Bengals will be fine with Gio. Why rush Joe Mixon out there on a bum ankle and re-aggravate that?
I agree with you. From Sean on YouTube Live, I have Brandon Cooks, Juju Smith-Schuster, Nick Chubb, and Austin Eckler. I guess it was just a response. It wasn't who I should start. It was just that he has those guys. Yeah, well, congratulations. They're very good. Brandon Cooks, Juju Smith-Schuster, Nick Chubb, and Austin Eckler. I would feel very good about that as well. Are you buying on Austin Eckler for the remainder of the season, Sam? Only in the sense that clearly he has a role in the passing game anyway as that satellite back, regardless of whether Melvin Gordon comes back or not. And the numbers indicate, too, that when tight ends get hurt for the Chargers, their running back catch percentages go way up, upwards of 27, 28%. If anything, I'm trying to acquire Austin Eckler as soon as I can. And if he has a tough game this week, I'm still trying to buy low on him because I think his role is going to be huge for the Chargers this year.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if you can expect RB1 numbers just because, well, no, I can't say that because, like you said, the PPR side of things, Eckler already had a role. And now his role probably expands with Virgil Green starting at tight end, not to mention that Melvin Gordon's no longer there, so he's going to see his snap share up. He's going to see his usage up. So, yeah, I think I'm buying in on Eckler this season because I don't expect Gordon to be back until at least week, I would say, is it week 9 or 10, regardless.
Yeah.
And maybe sell high when he has a couple or a few fantastic games. But until then, yes, I am buying him as an RB1 right now.
All right, we got about 5 minutes left, and I know you got your own live show to get ready for. So if anybody has any last-minute questions, we've gone through a bunch. I think we've been able to answer everybody's questions that have been participating in the live stream today. So we thank you guys for participating in that. We got about 5 minutes left to answer your lineup questions, and I'll go through my Beat Benny Heist lineup over on fantasysportsmarkets.com as well. Sam, are there any cash or GPP plays if you didn't have to worry about salary? If there was, if you were trying to fit in a lineup and you can basically play whoever you want if you're playing on a site like FSM, who are a couple of guys for you that have really stood out based on their matchup and their opportunity this week that you're going to be all over in daily this week?
It has been hard to set a lineup without any Raiders. I have one lineup out of 7 that don't have any Raiders, but it was difficult. I mean, Tyrell Williams has a good matchup.
Great matchup.
Darren Waller has a good matchup. Josh Jacobs has a good matchup. I mean, and if that's the case, Derek Carr is likely going to have a good matchup. And mind you, Gardner Minshew, coming off of the bench as a rookie in his first game, threw for 285 yards and 2 touchdowns last season. Derek Carr probably has a ceiling of 300 yards and 3 touchdowns this week because they're going to have to throw to keep up with the Charge or with the Chiefs. So it's been difficult not to set those lineups. I threw in a lineup with Willie Snead this week.
Wow.
And I know that's a little bit like out there, and obviously it's a GPP play. But if you look at last week, what the Lions did to the Cardinals, Danny Amendola was targeted 13 times, caught 8 for over, I believe it was 105 yards and a touchdown as a slot receiver. Obviously, Willie Snead being the slot receiver for Baltimore. He was I think he caught the most targets from Lamar Jackson last season after he was a starter, and I think he could have a sneakily good game this week. So he's in one of my lineups, and then Michael Gallup. I don't know about his ownership, but I think a lot of people are probably a little bit not expecting Michael Gallup to do what he did last week. And I'm going to say that might be wrong because he's facing Washington Redskins, that team that just allowed Deshaun Jackson to blow them up with well over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he serves as that deep ball or the deep wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. And I don't know why he couldn't do the same thing as Deshaun Jackson did last week.
In looking at Michael Gallup's projected ownership, we have a nice partnership with thequantedge.com. Michael Gallup projected 7.6% ownership.
There you go.
So you're right. I think a lot of people are not on the Cowboys, and they should be. Amari Cooper might even have less ownership. He's projected for 2.85%. Yep. Dak Prescott, I think, is right around 5% as well. Let's see. He is... Yeah, just over 5% ownership. And I'll tell you this, too. That game against Washington, I think, is stackable on both sides. I think McLaurin has the ability to go deep. I think Chris Thompson, we talked about him a little bit earlier as well, with the high floor and a potential high ceiling as well. Case Keenum threw for 380 yards and 3 touchdowns last week, and Jay Gruden does not want to use Adrian Peterson. Like, he's made that abundantly clear that he just has zero interest, so he's going to throw the ball. And then Vernon Davis with another nice opportunity this week as well. I think you can stack both sides of that game and with super low ownership as well.
Yeah, I agree. One other one I like, and I this has just been recently, is Will Fuller against the Jaguars. I think a lot of people
I like him.
are avoiding the Jaguars this week because of that cornerback duo, but AJ Boye is out with a hip injury, and you expect Jalen Ramsey to be shadowing DeAndre Hopkins this week. And so that leaves Will Fuller with the third string cornerback, which I don't even know who that is at this point. And stacking Watson and Fuller, I think, is a great GPP play this week.
All right, we got one more question, then I will let you get ready for your live show coming up in about 5 minutes. One more from Jared over on YouTube. Full PPR, Brandon Cooks or Deshaun Jackson. He said he sat Jackson last week and he regrets it. They both could just go nuts this week, and this is a tough decision. Again, against Atlanta secondary, I think you can take advantage of it, but I do love Brandon Cooks this week, and the last 2 times out that he's played the Saints,
Last three times out.
Yeah, he's gone for over 100 yards. I know he's gotten touchdown in his last 2 games. So the revenge game narrative is great for Brandon Cooks. And again, whenever he's at home, too, he's played better because Jared Goff plays better at home. I'm siding with Brandon Cooks this week. If Jackson goes off again, then you kind of just sort of tip your cap. But I'm going Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, I mean, Jackson has been boom bust his entire career. Brandon Cooks has been, I feel, a lot more consistent. And it's going to be a high-scoring game. I mean, I agree. I think both are going to be high-scoring, but it's the Saints and the Rams. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think that all 3 wide receivers are viable for the Rams, and I do think, like you said, revenge game narrative, he's probably good for another 100 yards this week.
I think that's fair. All right. Sam, thank you for hopping on. Last minute, that was more than clutch. I'm looking forward to joining you guys on the Fantasy Football Mercenary Show coming up, which starts at 10:30. I'll be on at 11 Central. But appreciate your time, brother. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, so as Sam says goodbye, don't forget to join him coming up in just a little bit. I will go ahead and reveal my Beat Benny Heist lineup for FantasySportsMarkets.com. Again, there is a free promo code at the bottom of the screen. And again, it's $5 for free. You can enter it. We've already had some of our big GPPs fill up the $5 with the $50,000 bonus already filled up. But we still have the $10 contest for week 2. Standard League, those are non-Superflex. That's a $50,000 bonus. And both of our Superflex contests at $5 and $10 are set to overlay. So highly recommend it. FantasySportsMarkets.com. Use that promo code when you register, FF Sunday. That'll get you $5 free. At the quarterback spot, it's hard to go against Pat Mahomes. I did it last week, and I immediately regretted the decision. I'm not concerned about his ankle injury just because there's so many playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. So Mahomes will be my starting quarterback. Running back, give me Ezekiel Elliott in a nice matchup for Dallas. I know that a lot of people were impressed with what they saw out of Prescott last week, but Zeke has done well historically against Washington. I think he will do the same again. Alvin Kamara is in the nut spot of the week. He's in every single cash and tournament lineup that I will make. So give me Zeke and Kamara. Again, no salary cap, so you don't have to worry about trying to figure out who you can fit in as far as salary goes. Wide receiver spots, Juju Smith-Schuster of the Steelers is in play for me. I think it's a bounce-back opportunity for Pittsburgh, as I've mentioned multiple times on the show. And Julio at home with Matt Ryan in the Dome. I'm very excited about this week. Tight end, if I have Mahomes, I'm going to go ahead and pair him up with Travis Kelce. It's not get too cute. Here's where you can have some fun with multiple super flex positions. I'm going to go back to Lamar Jackson. He was an outstanding play, obviously, in week 1. They have another great matchup this time at home against Arizona. Even if he doesn't end up running around again, he's still in position to just destroy Arizona's secondary with some talented wide receivers in Baltimore. I don't know if Hollywood Brown's going to have the game that he did last week, but I certainly like Lamar Jackson once again. And this is the tough part. I currently have Matt Ryan in my other Superflex, and I compare him with Julio, but I'm debating between Matt Ryan and Ben Roethlisberger in that Superflex spot. Right now I'm leaning Ryan, and that's the guy that I have in because I expect Julio to have a big game. But Philadelphia's defense got embarrassed last week, and I know that it's a tough matchup anytime you have to go on the road, but historically the Falcons have done well against the Eagles in the Georgia Dome, so I'm probably staying Matt Ryan. I might flip it last minute for Big Ben. And then the Houston Texans defense against Gardner Minshew. I love Gardner Minshew. I love everything about him, what he stands for. The mustache is great. But he looked better than he is against Kansas City's defense, and that's another reason why you can feel pretty good about putting some Oakland Raiders on your daily fantasy squads this week as well. And that is it. Thank you guys for being a part of Fantasy Football Sunday on the FSM Network. My name is Ben Heisler. Justin Fensterman from SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio and Fantasy Alarm will be with you next week. He'll be with us. I'll be doing the show from my parents' house in Chicago. We'll be in for a family wedding. So I won't have this beautiful Kansas City skyline behind me. It'll probably be some sort of a bookshelf. So thank you guys, as always, for being a part of it. This video will be immediately available on YouTube once it is done if you want to go through some of our plays. And thank you guys, as always, for participating both on YouTube Live and on Periscope. Until next week, make sure you guys check in and go play at fantasysportsmarkets.com. There is overlay for the Superflex contest, so go out and win. Thank you guys for watching. We will talk to you next week.